thought I'd come out here and maybe speak on some matters of concern that we have noticed in the last few days here. The recount inside, let's address that first, has been going fairly smooth. The staff have been, what I'd say, acting a lot more professionally compared to when we first embarked on this exercise. What we have seen is that the machinery in itself is tabulating upwards of 80 boxes per day, and we expect that it's going to be concluded hopefully by the 9th of May, after which the report will be presented, and then we move forward from there. I think there has been an amendment to the order. I think that has been ventilated by the commissioners in themselves coming out here, so I won't touch on that. There is something that is of urgent concern to the Liberty and Justice Party, and that is a communique that was brought to our attention today, seemed to have emanated under the hand of Justice Claudette Singh, retired, asking for the Chief Immigration Officer to investigate into the absence of people on voting day. There are several issues that are wrong with that in itself. The first is that, in our view, and based on the legal advice that we've had, is that the Guyana Elections Commission does not have within its mandate the powers to undertake such exercise, as is outlined under Article 163 of the Constitution, and that also has been amply ventilated by one of the country's most prominent legal mind in constitutional law, Mr. Ralph Ramkaran, who is also a member of a new and united Guyana. I'm no legal mind in that sense. But what is concerning to us is the representation that Ms. Claudette Singh has made. We have had several conversations with her previous to, or I'd say prior to her 22nd of May letter to the Chief Immigration Officer, of which none of this was revealed. The Liberty and Justice Party and New and United Guyana, the New Movement and Change Guyana have all jointly requested a meeting with Madam Chair and the Commission. That's over a week now, and we have not received any word, and it is to provide clarity on the very same issues that are here. Aside from operating outside of its mandate, the Elections Commission has asked a government entity that is contesting in these elections to provide evidence that pretty much should verify the information that they themselves are presenting. And what do I mean by that? If you look at who the person is that is in charge of immigrations, it is Winston Felix. He is a political operative. Mr. Leslie James in himself has shown a bit of bias in our view. So basically, you're asking the government to provide verification from themselves to the commission that has no mandate to take this evidence to consider allegations that are made. I'm not going to stand in defense of any political party's position except for the Liberty and Justice Party, because that is who I speak for. We are very, very concerned that Madam Chair is going down a very, very slippery slope. Take, for example, there was a dossier that was presented to FARA that stated in it that Mr. Granger and Mr. Harmon in themselves were dual citizens. The Commission has not undertaken to ask those people to provide evidence that they have renounced their citizenship with the U.S., and we're curious to know why that has not been done. If you're looking for wrongdoing also, what we have seen in this tabulation center and in this recount is that Mr. Mingo's numbers in themselves were completely flawed, inflated, but yet there has been no attempt made to address that issue, the fraudulent declaration by Mr. Mingo. We are curious to know if Madam Chair is going to ask the police to come and conduct a criminal investigation into the conduct of Mr. Mingo and whoever else his cohorts may be, to try to find a way to address that. Once again, this is a very, very slippery slope that we are embarking upon. If you're to ask the Immigration Department for information, the boundaries of Guyana are so porous that you could actually land in Brazil and take a car and drive over without ever having your passport stamped. And I know because I've gone in and out of Brazil. You could do the same thing in Venezuela and Suriname. So to ask for verification, there is a whole plethora of things that are actually absent in that scenario. The potential exists that Lenox Shuman could leave Guyana on a Guyanese passport and come back on a Canadian passport if I would have met the requirement to do so. Not only that, coming to Guyana, you also have to prove that Lenox Shuman in himself did not go to that booth or did go to that booth and voted, or someone voted in Lenox Shuman's place. Those things in themselves are very, very difficult to prove. Should there be an investigation into the events of the elections 2020? No doubt. But that investigation, in our view, and based on the legal guidance that we have, needs to emanate from an elections petition. I'm not going to come here and puppet or parrot the PPP or the PNC's line. They've done enough for themselves. We have seen in certain cases, for example, and when I talk about allegations, and I recall from our joiners party, a new and united Guyana that was represented in Region 3, that on one of those observation reports, there were about 179 voters that matched the counterfoil. But beyond that, they had over 200 votes in that box. It means at that point that there is an intermixing of the discipline services votes in that box, but yet the numbers do not reflect on the observation report. And when they had attempted to address that in the tabulation station, they said that those comments cannot make it on this report. So obviously the documents that are being prepared, the observation reports in themselves, have some very serious flaws in them because not everything makes it on there. And as we look at it right now, the majority of those things are unsubstantiated allegations. I remember the chair making an assertion that he who accuses must prove, or something to that effect. He who asserts must prove. I think what Madam Chair has implied by her communication from the 22nd of May, it is not he who asserts must prove. What we can look at right now is that she has implied by that communication that he who asserts must come to me to prove. Because basically, if we have 200,000, just a rough number, 200,000 allegations, does that mean now that we go and ask the Guyana Elections Commission to prove it? Because that seems to be the direction that the chair of the Guyana Elections Commission is going. And at this point, we could all throw wild allegations out there to undermine the system. And you have to remember, when these elections started, the AP and UAFC said we won. In fact, if you look back at what happened on December 21st, 2018, there has been absolutely nothing, not by deed, not by anything, within which the AP and UAFC has been willing to accept a defeat. Initially, they said we're going to accept that the no confidence motion has passed, and then they turned around and started to fight it. And not only that, they dragged the entire nation all through 2019 to bring us to this point where they say we've won, we won, we won. And now that we're finding that they did not legitimately won, that they want to do every single thing that they can to undermine this process. This is no longer about winning elections. It is no longer about Guyana becoming the winner. This is about the AP and UAFC unwilling to accept anything that says that they would have lost the no confidence motion, they would have lost the right to govern Guyana, or maybe the privilege to govern Guyana. By virtue of that, they would have lost these elections. There seems to be no formula that exists under which the APNU AFC is willing to concede that they do not have the capacity to govern this country. And I'll leave it there. I'm open to questions if you have any.
You're saying that the chair is acting illegally by launching a probe. Is your party considering legal action against the commission for taking this decision?
We are still seeking legal advice on that. We still have a lot of considerations to undertake. That being the conclusion of Region 4 and looking at what Mr. Mingo's numbers reveal with finality. And we'd be guided by those numbers when they come in.
Do you think that the commissioner of police is somehow compromised?
By every action that we've seen from the Guyana Police Force, I think that there are a lot of them that act with integrity. Whether the Commissioner of Police is compromised, I can say that as a small party or as a new party, we do not have the kind of confidence in his conduct at this point.
So what's the next move for your party from here now? What's going to happen next?
From here, we want to ensure that this exercise come to a decisive conclusion, because only when we get to the end of this, then we'd be on better footing to decide which direction to go. If they try to undermine this recount, for example, then what do we fall back on? There must be something that we fall back on. So it is important that we conclude this process. There are obvious fears that we have. As we start to go down, if there is any harm to come to Madam Chair, for example, it would throw this country into turmoil for the next 2 years, or maybe a lot more. Because if the chair does not make, let's say, Madam Chair falls ill, and we are very conscious about that, and people faking being ill and stuff like that. Then she says, all right, well, I can't attend meetings, and she could, how long would that take? If she says, all right, well, I resign from this post because I don't want to deal with this, then we have to go through a whole confirmation, which would take a lot longer again, because the Constitution does not stipulate within it how long that process must take, right? There is also the issue of Mr. Lowenfield becoming unavailable as we draw closer, and I have not seen him in the last few days. So as we draw closer to this, remember, in the order, it is incumbent upon Mr. Lowenfield to prepare a report to give to the Commission. Now, if Mr. Lowenfield is not present, what instrument exists for him to delegate to the DCO, and what willingness exists within the DCO to undertake to preparing this report? So there are a lot of things that we are considering, and we have to ensure that this process come to an end.
The chief immigration officer is a public servant. On what basis are you saying that that person may be politically compromised just because a minister heads that ministry? Isn't that person a public servant and can issue a report?
We have seen situations under which public servants in themselves have conducted themselves less than reputable.
So we're just saying nothing from public servants.
Take, for example, Ms. Janelle Christian, who had the Office of Climate Change, a candidate for the APNUFC, but yet did not resign her post. Mr. Christopher Jones in the Sports Commission did not resign his post. You've got many, many people who are candidates for the APNUFC who did not resign their official post.
But the chief immigration officer is not on the candidate list for any party.
Not on the candidate list, but the issue with that is that they have not given us the confidence that they're going to conduct themselves with integrity. There is also something different. I mean, the so-called ministers in themselves are being paid by the public purse, but yet they end up in counting stations during the week. So they're acting in a partisan political capacity while being paid by the public purse. So they have not given us that confidence that they're going to act objectively and with integrity.
Well, they are candidates and they have a right to be here, but I'm saying that what evidence do you have that the chief immigration officer is politically compromised?
Well, let me ask you this question in return.
Well, the question is not for me, it's for you, Mr.
No, absolutely, but I will answer your question with an answer, with a question. Has there been anything that has given this country any degree of confidence in the public institutions that exist for the public, there has not been. Nothing.
So therefore, the evidence that you've been asking for, because you said that, you know,
I-
political parties would have...
We're not asking for evidence.
Political parties would have given, made allegations, and you've said that these allegations have been unsubstantiated, sorry. So, if you're asking for it to be substantiated, then wouldn't the good men and women of our country working in the public service be able to provide this information?
I'm not asking for evidence. What we're saying is that it is beyond the mandate of the Guyana Elections Commission at this juncture to be pursuing anything of that sort because it stands in violation of Article 163 of the Constitution. And once again, that has been ventilated amply by Mr. Ramkaran, and you can refer to that interview which was done last week.
And you're saying that there's possibility that the chief immigration officer may be politically compromised?
I am saying that we do not have the confidence in public officers in this country to execute their mandate objectively and apolitically.
Mr. Shuman, while the Constitution, the recount is not conducted under the provisions of 163, right, 162 instead, you have been here from day one in a supervisory role, I think, as you said. Region 4 is halfway through now. Region 9 and Region 10 here to go. Those are completed across the board. The GLP, have you noticed any instances of irregularities across the board during the recount process?
Well, let me correct you first. We're not the GLP. We're not in Jamaica. We're the Liberty and Justice Party.
Well, JP.
And we have not noticed anything that is consistent except for allegations emanating from the AP and UFC. If there is one thing that is consistent, it is pretty much that they go into a room, throw out a series of numbers. When we ask for an opportunity to scrutinize the document from which the staffers of the Guyana Elections Commission are reading those numbers, they refuse to give it to us. So there are circumstances under which, and situations under which, the Guyana Elections Commission staff, not all of them, I said this yesterday in a live video, a small fraction of them are willing to be willing participants in the whole slew of allegations that the AP and UAFC is throwing out there.
How would you explain your party, along with other parties, gaining additional votes during these recounts, where those votes were previously not counted and were found where they're not supposed to be?
This entire exercise here is being conducted by people like you and myself and all of us here. People. And once you inject people into any system, you're bound to find mistakes. That is a fact. There is also something that is called the law of large numbers. As you increase the number in any system, you increase obviously the efficiency of what you do, but you also increase with that the potential for mistakes. So the fact that the elections were conducted by people, there is going to be mistakes. And for us, we have not seen such variations to say that there is a pattern. If there is a pattern that exists, it is just the baseless allegations that are being thrown out by the AP and UAFC. Take, for example, Mr. Jonas was here, I think, 2 days ago, telling the very public as to why it is virtually impossible for people to vote twice, for dead to vote, for migrants to vote who are out of the country and all these things. He also went through about the discipline services, about the 2,600 that we've discovered so far, at least tabulated, I'd say. Numerically, all of those things have been explained. So I don't know what new information I can offer in that front, except to say that this exercise is completed by people like you and I. And we are going to make mistakes. We are going to see mistakes. but there is also a globally accepted standard as to what is credible and what's not, right? In terms of percentage of error. And we have not even reached 1% of error in these elections yet.
Given the 2600, which is a large number, there are also instances, confirmed instances from the Commission of a large number of poll books which will show the operations of the police station on the and which will speak to state of employment, oath of identity, and that sorts of things that are missing. Right? Would you still consider those to be normal human?
Well, I'm not going to come here and substantiate anyone else's accusation because I think Ms. Yolanda Ward came out here about a week and a half to 2 weeks ago and made it explicitly clear that there are no poll books missing. So once again, I'm not going to come and try to justify the APNUAFC's position. I think that was also very clearly addressed by the public relations officer, Ms. Yolanda Ward, at this very podium.
Sir, just to follow up on that, when Ms. Ward made that statement, it was in the first week of the recount, and she said at that time there were no poll books missing at that time, which is at the first week. And after that, the weeks that passed after, there were allegations of poll books being missing, and she did confirm off the record that some were reported missing afterwards.
Once again, that is not my position to address that. I think that is for Ms. Yolanda Ward to come out here and represent the Commission because at the end of the day, it speaks to the Commission's conduct of elections. In terms of poll books, our understanding is that the poll books reside with the returning officers, that there was no requirement for them to be part of this recount process. That is my understanding. I cannot speak beyond that because I don't know beyond that.
But did you observe any allegations being made during the recount process in one of your stations that you would have observed of these books being reported missing?
We have not seen that. That has not come to my attention yet. There is also the allegation of discipline services votes going missing or not being counted. First, I'd say that is arguably one of the most irresponsible comments that you can make at elections time. And it is contrary to the fact. When you look at how many discipline services are there, there is no specific pattern as to how it is counted, how it is potentially stamped or not stamped. Those are just baseless allegations. Because there is no way, and I will say this again, there is absolutely no way to tell which vote is a discipline services vote, which vote is a Lenox Shuman's vote, which vote is a Timothy Jonas vote. There is absolutely no way for anyone to tell unless I go and write Lenox Shuman on something with my fingerprint and my picture. There is no other way. I could write Lenox Shuman, but how do I know that someone else didn't do that?
Mr. Shuman, a clarification, I don't want to quote you wrong. You're specifically saying that the LGB, right, would have recognized no instances of irregularities during your time observing these reports. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely not. You ask if there's any pattern of irregularities. And I said that the only pattern that we've seen is the baseless allegations from the APNUAFC. If there is any irregularity, absolutely there will be. Take, for example, the Liberty and Justice Party could not find one vote in Diamond. If I were to come out here and wreak havoc on this media tent and the country for one vote, that would be very irresponsible of me. Because at the end of the day, the elections are conducted by people. And people do make mistakes from time to time. But we have not seen it in a magnitude that would cause any alarm.
There have been two instances, one in Region 7 and one in Region 4, where the list for the official list of electors for a respective box was found in another box. Two instances of those. Would you consider those human errors?
Absolutely. Absolutely we would. Take, for example, also, you're talking about irregularities We know that indigenous peoples generally don't have ID cards, identification cards. So when you go to vote, there is roughly, I'd say, based on our numbers, about 3 to 4% of indigenous peoples that don't have identification cards. So by virtue of that, they don't have a picture taken, but they live in a small community. So everyone knows everyone. And when they go to vote, they take their oath of identity. Some of them can't write. So what are you going to sign? You can't sign for them, right? So when you look at that, region 7, 8, if you go to the deep south in the Rupununi, if you go places like Baramita and stuff like that, you are going to find these things. It is going to happen, but you cannot say that those things would cause such a massive deviation in the electoral results.
And according to the Representation of the People's Act, the elections would have provided for instances where persons are not in possession of ID cards. And would you not say that, therefore, the poll book, the oath of identity, or the certificate of employment becomes critical at that point? Or for even this purpose of recounting and identifying that those persons who were not in possession of ID cards, that we can solidly say that, yes, this is a record and they didn't have their ID card and they were able to vote by this means.
Once again, I cannot comment on GCOM's internal mechanism and how they address those things. I can simply tell you as to the information that we have and that we know, and we have not seen a pattern that was meant to disenfranchise anyone in this country at this point, right? Yesterday, I saw, for example, where they claimed that 18 persons, the APNUAFC claimed that 18 persons voted in St. Cuthbert's, my community, that have immigrated. Where do you pull that rabbit out from? You can't say you pulled it out from a hat. It must be from somewhere else. Because I voted in that community that day. I stood there from, I was, I think, voter number 5, to the very end, to the closing, when they tabulated everything. I was there. And I will tell you that everyone that was there lives in that community, is from that community, and voted in that community. There were no aliens there. There were no dead people voting.
Was this recorded in the observation report?
I have not looked at the observation report because that issue just came up yesterday. That observation report has already gone within the first week or two, I think. So if you want, I could go back and visit that, and I could provide you with that information if you need to. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, folks.